Welcome back to another episode of Daddy Knows Best. It's your boy AJ.
This is Coach Eli. I'm glad you got through that intro. So let's keep going. Let's
So
keep going. Let's keep going this time.
so today we're going to touch on a topic that affects a lot of people, especially a lot of people in our community. We're going to touch on sickle cell. And today we have one of my very best friends on the podcast, and he has a child that suffers through sickle cell. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and discuss this with us today, Sam.
No problem.
Bryant. Oh, well,
Bryant, yeah. Sam Bryant.
Sam Bryant.
I mean, I didn't know if you were going to say his name or not, but you know what? We look, and with all that said, thank you for joining us, man. AJ's told me a lot about you. It's good to meet you, and I can't wait
Same
to
here.
kind of hear some information, learn something from you, and just get your story because this is a very, very important subject that we need to broach.
Yeah, and with that being the subject, I got a question for you. Is anybody in your family else carry the trait, or is this something that you were familiar with prior to your child?
Yeah. So, yeah, my mother has a trait, and maybe about a year before my boy was born, one of my cousins had a daughter who also has sickle cell disease. Actually, yeah, yeah,
So for my own edification, kind of break down what sickle cell is really.
yeah. So it's a blood disease. Basically, blood cells are shaped like little discs.
Mm-hmm.
And people with sickle cell, they're shaped like sickles, right? So like little with sharp edges. The challenge with that shape compromises the cell, so those cells die faster. So
Right.
blood levels can drop quicker. Those shapes also get caught in people's veins. They could get caught in all different places, but when they do get caught up in places, it creates pain. That's like the pain crisis that you hear about. Yeah.
Got you. So
hmm
what are the typical um is there a cure?
It seems that they're working on one. They
Okay.
are like they've released it for I think people 12 years of age and older. My boy's 5. Yeah, and it's very limited at this point, but yeah, it seems promising.
Oh wow. Okay.
hmm
Okay. So at what point again, forgive me for my lack of knowledge,
hmm
but at what point did you know or is it a matter of carrying a trait and then something happens to for lack of a better way activate it or
Yeah, yeah.
like
No,
how does
no.
that work?
So they test for it now. So they test
Okay.
for it now. Yeah, when a baby's born, they test for it. For my wife and I, it was our third child. We go in for the 2 week visit, and
Mm.
I never forget it now. The doctor was like, "Hey, did I forget the name of the department?" But she was like, "Hey, did such and such department call you guys?" And we were just like, "No, why?" And then she kind of like a little pause or whatever. She's like, "Oh yeah, some of his tests came back, and he has sickle cell." Yeah.
Wow.
hmm
So it skipped the first two kids.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
if it skips the first two, they carry a trait, or like I'm sorry,
hmm
this is very interesting.
Yeah, they carry the trait. Yeah. So the way it
Okay,
works is two people with the trait come together, have a baby. That baby has a 25% chance of getting the disease.
wow,
hmm
okay,
Yep. So it was our third boy that got it.
got you, got you.
hmm
So when you first heard that news, what did you think? Like, what went through your mind?
Actually, I forgot about the whole damn potential. I mean, like honestly, like having our first two kids, I have for, I forgot that we had this chance of having a baby with sickle cell. So the first thing was, oh shit, like I don't know what I don't know what's about to happen. My wife got really upset. Yeah, she got really upset, and in that moment, and I just kind of looked, and I knew I had to keep it calm, but in my mind, I mean, my mind was going, 300 different directions, trying to understand what was going to happen next. Yeah.
So that's more the part I want to go to. So in those moments when your wife, when she's going through it, how do you keep your composure? Like you said, you're going 300 miles an hour. You're going
Hmm.
300 ways. How are
Hmm.
you able to keep your composure through all of that?
I don't know. I just have to. You know what I mean? like I just have to. I, I actually would attribute it, a good bit of that to my mother. My mother has this sort of attitude where like anything happens and she's just kind of like, all right, we'll deal with it. You know, she's not, even when I told her, she doesn't get like excited in that way. Her first thing is like, all right, we'll deal with it. What we have to do, what are we going to read? What are we going to look at? Where are we going to get information and what are we going to do? And so I think that's where I start. And then, you get through some hurdles and you got to deal with it. You got to be real. You know what I mean? But like that, I always start with like, all right, how are we going to do this? Yeah.
So you said you all found out at the 2 week visit.
Hmm.
So that minimized any preparation for
Right.
whatever it is that you were going to be experiencing. But once you did find out, you said you start reading or start researching or whatever.
Hmm.
But what is the main source for understanding what you're going to may experience? Not guaranteed that you're going to see every single thing that you read about,
Hmm.
but how do you plan? How do you prepare for certain things? Like, were there anything essentials or anything that you needed to have, as far as knowledge or material things to have
Hmm.
in place?
Yeah. The funny thing about sickle cell, I don't want to minimize it in this way, but largely as far as what you can do as a parent to sort of like mitigate things is really hydration, right? So like now there's new drugs, that, like, for instance, Cam's 5. If he was 10 years old, his experience would have been totally different, because there's new drugs that actually are more protective for his blood. And so we've experienced a lot, but we also are aware of folks who experience a lot more. But it all really comes down to hydration, and that's difficult, especially with a young baby, trying to make sure that they're getting enough,
Right.
and then medications. Yeah. Hmm.
So what was the one of the first major challenges that you all experienced? That you're like, you know what? All right, we're not trying to, like you said, not trying to minimize it, but we're in here now. We have
Yeah.
to deal with this. What was the first thing that you all experienced to let you know like this is real?
Yeah. So with sickle cell, so when a baby's born with sickle cell, and all babies are born this way, they have what's called fetal hemoglobin. And fetal hemoglobin it's more like typical hemoglobin, right? And you produce more of that all the way up until you're about 6 months. And then you start producing the hemoglobin that you're gonna ultimately produce as an adult. Um, Fetal hemoglobin is much more, it's round, it's protective, like, and the way it was described to me is that it has the potential to push and help like usher along the sickle cells, right? So it the experience was this: 2 weeks of bliss, new baby, super happy, 2 week appointment. Things get tricky. What's next? What are we going to experience? And then honestly, for the next 6 months, we didn't have any issues. And so it kind of gets you in a point where you're kind of like comfortable and you're caught flat-footed, you know?
Yeah.
And so then at 6 months, when things started, changing over as far as his hemoglobin, the first challenge we had was he just got really lethargic, and he got a fever, and we took him in, and what the doctors found was that his blood was getting caught in his spleen. And yeah, it's just like the sickling was happening in the spleen. And what happens there is the spleen will like absorb a lot of the blood, it'll expand and get hard. So one of the things they actually teach you when you have a baby with sickle cell is how to feel for the spleen, like palpitate the spleen and figure out if it's sickling or not. I mean, if it's what they call it sequestering. Yeah, splenic sequestration. And so that was the first time we had an issue, and that was for the first, from 6 months to like 2 years. That was the majority of the challenges we had. We didn't have a pain crisis with Cameron, at least none that we could like notice. Like
Right.
he never had like bouts of like extreme crying and you just know somebody's in agony. He never had that. He would more so become like lethargic and just lackluster, low energy, and then he would get like a fever, and then we'd take him into the hospital, and most of the time it was that. Yeah, that was a tough bit. And when that happens, the first intervention is they do IV fluids, and then sometimes that's enough to sort of like push that situation off and kind of get things flowing again. But sometimes what happens is if it goes on long enough, and it all sort of it piles on. So if he has splenic sequestration, then what'll happen is he'll get a fever. Now heat kills blood cells as well, and it dehydrates you, right? So one, he's got blood getting trapped in his spleen. Two, he's got a fever, which is accelerating the breakdown of his blood cells. And then three, he's getting like dehydrated, right? And so all those things, they can things can escalate quickly. And then if the IV fluids don't work, then they have to do transfusion, blood transfusion.
Wow.
Yeah.
So does that equate to a lot of hospital stays or like quick in and outs or outpatient
hmm
appointments or something like that?
Kind of both. Kind of both and not, right? And so what I mean by that is many more overnight hospital stays than my other two children, right? His situation has been described as less severe than other kids who have sickle cell. Some kids with sickle cell are in the hospital every month, every other month,
Right.
you know what I mean, for a week at a time and all that sort of stuff. Cam on average has been hospitalized probably two to three times a year, most, and that was sort of like front loaded from like 2 years to 3 years. I'm sorry, from 6 months to 2 years. It was just like a lot. And the thing about when you have a baby with sickle cell, anytime that baby gets a fever, even if it's just like, you know how often babies get fevers, you know what I mean? So a baby with sickle cell, though, it's automatic. You got to take them into urgent care and have them seen because it's much easier for things like bacterias and such like that to grow in their blood. So you have to have them seen. And so there's a lot of that where, especially in those first 2 years, you take them in, he's got a fever, you take them in. There's a whole fever protocol at the hospital. So like babies with sickle cell, they skip the line. Yeah, you go in there and people have to advocate for the children. If you just go in and say you got a fever, you're going to wait. But you say, my boy has sickle cell or my girl has sickle cell and a fever, then you're pretty much next in line.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead, AJ.
So I want to talk about that, like those hospital visits, those hospital stays. You also have two other children,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can't just be in the hospital and just be there overnight this whole time, and then these other children they can't just fend for themselves. These are young children.
Right.
How do you balance that dynamic when one child requires so much attention, but you still have these other children that require attention as well?
Yeah, the parents have to divide and conquer, man. Like one go, one stay. That's just is what it is. And then if the hospital visit is extended, then the job got to figure it out. And that's where we're lucky where we have professions that allow for some flexibility in time and all of that sort of stuff. But, I mean, that's really where it gets tricky because I can remember maybe it must have been between the first three times that we took Cameron in. I can remember we had to go to Children's, and in Children's, when you go in the ER, you're back there, and there's rooms typically with like 2 or 3 beds, and you're there for some hours, right? And you're there until you get assigned a bed. But I can remember being there, just kind of hanging out with Cam, and a lady coming in, and you can tell she was trying to tell the nurses and doctors almost anything that she could to get her boy up to a bed as quickly as possible because she had to go to work, and she just she didn't have another option, right? Like she wanted to get him up on the floor where she knew he would be safe, and then she had to go to work. And we were lucky we had a little bit more flexibility than that, which really came in handy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does Cam fall into the as far as ages?
He's the youngest.
He's the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
So how are all of your children's relationship? Meaning because we've seen in different situations that um that the support of the siblings means a lot to the youngest or the oldest or whichever one is going through their challenges or whatever they're faced with.
Mm-hmm.
But are they really that close to where they feed the energy feeds off of one another to kind of is that reassurance and that positive reinforcement that helps in
Yeah.
getting through whatever is faced.
We gonna find, so all my kids are 2 years apart. So I got a
Mm-hmm.
5-year-old, 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, I think there's understanding that's happening. There's not much to do, right? But there's understanding, and they're picking up on everything. Cam has medications that he has to take every day. Every once in a while, my middle boy Ashton will, hey, anybody give Cam his medicine, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? But other than that, I'm really curious to see. I'm hopeful that I won't have to see, but like I'm really curious to see as things play out a little bit later in life. Thinking like middle school, high school age sort of thing, because
Yeah.
that's where we're sort of going to lose as much control over their ins and outs. You know what I mean? Like right now, every morning I'm making sure Cam gets his hydration, he gets his, all of that sort of stuff, and my wife's doing the same thing and all of that sort of
Right.
stuff, right? But yeah, I'm curious to see like if he's a teenager, how much he can stay on top of that and all of that sort of stuff. But maybe I won't have to see that, but I think that's where it really will sort of come into play with his brothers.
I think also to that, how was it initially for them? For them when it's like, how do you explain to your siblings that hey, mom and dad, we're not going to be home tonight because your brother has to be in the hospital. Like, because I understand
Yeah.
they were young, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that they were really young, especially when it was going through it at those times. But
Yeah.
we can even talk about things, and I don't want to divulge too much, but like it's even holidays at times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they have to be separate from the rest of the family because mom and
Right.
dad have to be at the hospital, but we can't be here for you guys. But how do you do that? How do you balance that? Because I know that's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Well, we, as in my wife and I, we really don't. We lean on our we lean on our family, and friends, and those are mostly one and the same. Like all my friends, like AJ knows that, AJ's my family, Bernard's my family, you know what I mean? So like we're lucky in that way too. We got a good village that we can really lean on. Our kids are really comfortable in those spaces and those places. They, and we lean, bro. Like we just lean on it. We lean on it. Mentally for us is hard, right? That just it is what it is. You're in the hospital and you're dealing with that, and it's hard for everybody who's at the hospital. But then, it's rough, man, because it's like, we'll do like a video call from the hospital, and like luckily my other boys are somewhere having a good time with their family, you know. But it's also kind of hard to see, right? Because like I'm in a hospital bed with my boy, and he's all tubed up and poked up with IVs and such, and it's, they're doing what they're supposed to do, but it's tough to like look at those two things at the same time.
Right. So one thing I had one thing I had to ask is, I understand when we were talking about it earlier how AJ was asking how you dealt with it, and he said sometimes you just don't know.
Right.
But we're all human,
Hmm.
and as men, sometimes we sit back and we try to take everything on, right?
Hmm.
But has there been a time or that you just sat alone and either felt, not saying it's your, not like a fault thing, but like,
Hmm.
why did this have to happen, or this and that, or like when in those times, what kind of goes through your mind? Because no matter how strong you are, you still actually have to face the reality of what I'm dealing with. And
Hmm.
through no fault of anybody's own, that's what sometimes makes things more challenging, because there is no answer for it. But
Right.
in those times, or if you've ever experienced that, like what type of things go through your mind, and then how did you get to the other side, and how do you continue to stay strong, stay positive through everything that you're dealing with, for the sake of the family, for the sake of your son, and all of that.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have some down moments, man. Especially earlier on, with regards to like why me. That 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 sentiment is not really, I think, part of my personality. My question is also like, why not me, right? Like, who's deserving? Like, nobody's deserving. But I do have the moments like, yo, what, like, this sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is bad. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I think, like you said, like as men, that sometimes that's just it's the hard part of life, right? Like it's this is one of the hard things that you got to do, and it hurts. You should feel the hurt, deal with it. You can't deny it, right? I'm not gonna front or fake like I don't feel it, but I'm gonna take it. I take it, and then I talk though. You know, AJ knows this about. I'm a talker. I talk about all my stuff, man. I ain't shy about that. But yeah, I talked to my wife. I talked to AJ. I talked to my friends. Talked to my
Oh man,
dad.
you talked to
Yeah,
AJ. Whew.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Whew.
yeah. But yeah, yeah. I talked to AJ. Yeah.
But I do got something that you do that you've said numerous times is you keep saying we. Speak to the importance of having a partner to go through this with, because like you said, the lady you spoke of, you said she had to go to work. That almost feels as though, well, when she's gone, who else is going to be there? Type of
Yeah.
feeling. And
Well,
and
yeah. Well, I
speaking that
don't. I don't know her. I didn't know her
not saying about
relationship
her,
bit,
not saying
but
that she knows, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Um, yo, it's much better to have to deal with something like this with somebody you trust and love, and than not. I couldn't imagine. Like I couldn't imagine doing it all on my own, or she having to do it all on her own. Like that's yeah, it's much better. It's harder at times too though, because initially you'll have different opinions, or at some point you'll have different opinions on how to care for stuff, right? You'll also sort of like on some real shit. You go through challenges as to like who deals with what at what time. You know what I mean? Like there was a point where for some reason I just kept throwing my back out, and then when I would go and it was my turn to stay at the
Sam,
hospital.
Sam.
Hold on. Hey,
I'm
AJ,
talking
grow
about
up.
old cat problems. Like, come on, people
Yeah, I
get
know, but you
back.
gotta say, hey, man.
AJ, grow up. AJ,
Come on now, you serious,
come
right?
on, AJ.
Whatever, bro. All right. Anyway,
See, I just asked
injuring
you.
my back. All
Look,
right, so
I just asked you. Did you talk to AJ? Now,
yeah. But and so anyway, like in the hospital, there's no bed, right? There's no bed for a parent, right? They have like a couch that folds open to basically be in two real long couch cushions, and I would, when I had to sleep on that, it would, my injury would persist, and so we get in arguments over that sometimes, right? Yeah, so it's it's definitely better,
wow,
but there's definitely some challenges as well.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So overall, the the you have your village to lean on. Your friends,
hmm
family. But are there other resources that you can tap into, or that you stay abreast on, or anything that you just read on, listen to? Are those
Yeah.
those type of options as well to kind of help?
Yeah, but for me anyway, I have to be selective and sort of like limit how much information I constantly consume, right? So initially, when we found out, and before he was having any challenges, you would instantly you get on the internet, you start searching everything, you find out all this stuff, right? And part of what you find out is like, oh, there's a potential cure somewhere, right? But then you
Mm,
gotta, then you're like, okay, I'm on it. Every day I'm looking, that cure is probably a decade down the line. And looking at it every day and trying to track it every day will mess you up. You
yeah.
know, it will twist your head around, right? Um, and then there's also like, there's a charity, a local charity that I make donations to, and then they have events and stuff like that. And I remember calling up one of the ladies, one of the contacts from the website, and just kind of talking through it. And what I realized is that a lot of the experiences she was describing seemed to be not like a whole lot, but seemed to be a good bit more intense than what we were experiencing. And I didn't know whether like diving deeper was going to be healthy, to just kind of like, is it good to go and be aware? I think so. But is being so aware going to have me constantly like worrying and wondering when it's going to happen to us? You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot out there. And I just think folks should be selective and be easy on themselves with regards to like consuming that stuff. So a lot of times you can feel like, yo, this is my situation. I should be, or I have to be, and you don't. Like you need to be easy on yourself and just sort of like, yo, take as much of it as you feel you need. Pay attention, be aware, and then folks will let you know anyway, right? Like people, once people find out and you let people know, it's on everybody's radar. People shooting you little articles and stuff like that, which is helpful at times. Sometimes it catches me at the wrong moment. You know what I mean? But I rather those folks think of me than not think of me. But it's yeah. I mean, there's stuff out there, but I try to like really manage how much of it I consume. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. AJ, you froze?
No,
Oh. I
no, I ain't
thought you
breathe.
was froze. Nah, so I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, overall, so if it starts early, if sickle cell starts early, does it progressively get worse or does it get better? Like, what is how does that? That's what I'm interested in too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, potentially. So the drug that my son is on is called hydroxyurea. And what that drug essentially does, and really what all even like the cure does, right, is it
Hmm.
really promotes the production of fetal hemoglobin in people who are not infants, right? And then
Right.
that's protective, right? So that drug, like I said, I think if he was even 5 years older than he is now, his progression may have been much different, right? So on a daily basis, we deal with medicines. On maybe a quarterly to like semi-annual, time frame, we deal with like challenges, right? Um, what that's going to look like moving forward and talking to his hematologist and everything like that seems like this is likely the status quo. He's the biggest challenge he had was his spleen, and eventually we had to have that removed,
Hmm.
right? And so that comes with its own implications. He has to do like some antibiotics and stuff like that to make sure he's good. But for the most part, it's really it's a juggling game, right? He has to get blood tests every month, to monitor where things are, and we just have to manage it. So it doesn't seem. I think the answer to your question though is, I think in most people's experiences, especially in older folks who have sickle cell, I think
Hmm.
that their situations have gotten worse. Those the sickling crisis, they are damaging to it's not just pain and then once it's resolved it's free. Those 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 things are damaging, so yeah, there's a challenge there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Hey, what's wrong with you, AJ? Oh, but
I was
go ahead,
about to say
AJ.
you.
Oh no, I'm good.
We all good, everybody here.
Okay. So now you said they just have the status quo, right? Is there anything special accommodations in school or anything like that, or like
Yeah.
they have to make sure he's hydrated throughout school, or what happens now? Now that he's of school age and he can tell you, maybe I'm not feeling as well. What happens now?
Yeah, so it is really like managing his environment in school. So when he started kindergarten, we met with, school counselor, nurse, his teacher, and just sort of like, set up a game plan. So one, just things that you wouldn't even think about. Like if he falls and like bangs his knee up, like they can't put ice on that, you know. Yeah, like changes in
Wow.
temperature. Basically, you just think about it, right? Like if you put ice on something, it constricts blood flow. So if you
Hmm.
constrict blood flow in somebody with sickle cell, then you could create like a pain crisis. That's why lots of kids who, and luckily Cameron doesn't experience this, but lots of kids, like, you go to a pool in the summertime, you jump in that pool from being hot to cold, coming right back out. Some kids with sickle cell can go right into crisis right there. And crisis, when I
Wow.
say that, that's like a bout of pain, right?
Wow.
So stuff like that. If he gets, if he gets a fever, I think they're sending all kids home with fevers at this point, but it wasn't always that case. So like, if he gets a fever, you gotta go get him. Um, just mainly stuff like that. We have Tylenol and ibuprofen there for him, stuff like that. And yeah, if it's cold outside, like I think they said if it's warmer than 37 degrees, they go outside for recess. And yeah, we probably not having that. So, under, I think our plan is under 44 degrees. He doesn't go outside for recess or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, last question. And this is a question that we do ask.
Hmm.
But is there any advice that you would give a father or parents um that are going through this situation as far as dealing with a child with sickle cell? Is there any advice, any words of wisdom, any guidance that you could share with them to kind of help them along of understanding how to deal with it, or how to, just stay mentally engaged and strong for their child to make sure that they're able to get through? He's gone.
I don't know, man. It's a hard thing to prepare for, but I think I would advise somebody to just take it a step at a time and realize like it's an experience like any other experience you're gonna have, and you just have to go through it, right? Like if you get caught up trying to sort of focus in on the what the end result's going to be or how it's going to be over, I mean that shit is agony. So I would just say just experience it, man. And I mean it's going to be hard, and you just have to do it and be easy on yourself as you go. There's going to be moments where you get frustrated. Um, your partner, your wife, whoever it is, yeah, y'all gonna have some rough times, and you're gonna have to realize that a good bit of that is just the stress of going through that scenario, and you're not special in that way. Everybody who goes through this sorts of challenge likely has like some relationship challenges that can be attributed to it. You just got to go through that, recognize what it is, and and course correct when you can, But I think that's really about it.
Dope, dope.
Mhm.
Well, look, man, we if AJ doesn't have anything else, but
Nah, I
we
mean, I can. I'm gonna say we appreciate you being on, but I'm gonna say a little bit more. I know I didn't say it in the beginning. Uh, we tried to shoot the intro a dozen times and got it wrong,
Mhm.
but I will say in closing about Sam that reason why we chose you to be on here is because I believe you can speak to how people actually deal with going through this situation. I'm glad you brought the medical information that you brought because that can bring a lot of information as well. But just the human side, and I've seen it with my own eyes. It takes a lot. I've seen the toll that it takes, but I can see it, but your kids don't. And you've taken it on, and you all your kids have been able to still get their one-on-one time with dad. You've been able to still make sure that every kid feels loved exactly the same, no matter what challenges come. I've seen how the strength in you has come through within a child because I know those pain bouts come with him, and the way you train your mind to just be like, it comes, we deal with it, we go through it, and you can see it in your children as well. So keep up the great work, and it's I can see that it takes a toll, and it's hard for parents to have to deal with that, but be grateful. Well, not grateful, but I'm glad that you chose us to be part of your village. So just want you to
Yeah,
know
I
that
appreciate that.
it's a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that, man.
All right.
all right. Appreciate you, buddy.
All right, man. Take care.